That's four, is what Dan Campbell would say. Fourth straight win for the Lions, winning at Cincinnati, also covering the spread in this game, 37-24. A little bit higher scoring than I anticipated on both sides, but things really heated up there towards the end of this game. Cincinnati put some points on the board, Lions put some points on the board, but they ultimately ended up winning, and that's what mattered with this one. Heading into Kansas City next and Tampa Bay, a really big time stretch coming up, but four straight wins is fantastic. Set ourselves up really well with four straight wins, and we just had to handle business, and we did just that. No letdown here. We handled business. But overall, this was a game that I think in a lot of ways for me kind of went as expected. It just the timing was a little off. Like I thought Cincinnati, what they did in the second half, I thought we'd see maybe some of that a little bit earlier. It took a while for that to kind of open up. I think that we ran the ball a little bit more inconsistently than I thought we would. Towards the end, Montgomery got rolling a bit. Schematically, John Morton changed some things up at halftime, went more 13 personnel. We seemed to run the ball pretty well with that. Gibbs ran pretty darn well in the first half. It just felt a little bit more consistent than I expected. However, a big part of that was pre-week, what does that mean? Or before going into the game, I thought we'd have Taylor Decker. And I think losing Taylor Decker before the game ended up changing up some things. I think it really limited our ability to create explosives in the pass game downfield. I don't think we put ourselves in that position a ton because we understood that having Giovanni Monument was going to change some things. And here's a key element that I want to talk about really quickly is the idea of taking shots versus checkdowns. In this game, I thought it'd be a lot of level one, a lot of level three throws, and not as much level two because Cincinnati schematically does a really good job of taking away the middle of the field. Their linebackers play with a lot of depth. Their zone defenders in the middle of the field play with a lot of depth. They find routes, they carry them. So for that reason, it was going to be hard to, pick apart, 15 to 20-yard passes all day long over the middle of the field. I thought that's what they were going to focus on taking away. And I think that they did a pretty good job of that. But that meant that the openings were going to be, hey, take what's there underneath. And I think we did that early. Sam Laporta got rolling because of that. And then also the deep shots potentially. And that was like, hey, when they go cover six, can you split the safeties? Can you get those opportunities? Again, I think that was less impactful because we didn't have Taylor Decker. So it felt like we tried not to put ourselves in that position where Goff would have to stand back there that long and have that kind of pocket because I don't think we consistently did in this game. They do have some good pressure pieces. Obviously, I think they did a little bit better against the run than I expected, but I didn't think they were great there against the run. I thought they had some real dudes, though, in terms of pass rush. But with that being said, when you have that balance between working the checkdowns underneath and working some of those deep shots, I think the Lions ended up playing it the right way. But the challenge becomes is, okay, if you have to leave in extra bodies to give support, specifically when you don't have Taylor Decker and you have to chip, or here's a running back to stay in, or they bring a blitzer, because this is a team in Cincinnati that wasn't overly complex, at least coming into this game, in my view, in terms of what they're going to do schematically in the back end on first down. But what they did do was that they would blitz out of it. They would go cover three and blitz, or they go, with the simulated pressure. So if all of a sudden you have to leave in an extra body, maybe to help chip or actually stay in the pass protect, now you lose potentially your check down option. There was one example in this game where Gibbs stepped in, picked up the rusher, but now Goff doesn't really have a check down option. So now it's okay. Can you get vertical? Maybe. Do you have time for that? Probably not. And then the level two, they cover up well. So I think that led to a sack. So I think overall, Dan said, I don't know exactly what they did. Maybe it was different, but it kind of felt like that was their same game plan. Cincinnati's kind of felt like they played the game the same kind of way going all the way up to this point during the season. Dan said they had a good plan at halftime, and I would assume that that was a big element of this as we jump into it. But one thing I really want to do is also take a look at kind of what I thought coming into the game by going through my graphics that I had built out before the game and then reacting to them post game and kind of seeing how the Lions perform. Because I think that's a really good way that we could potentially analyze how the Lions actually performed versus just kind of changing maybe or moving the goalpost from what I expected. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to throw up a couple graphics, and there's a lot on this, but don't worry about most of this. Most of this is just me charting stuff so that I can get an idea of what a team likes to do, how they do it, that kind of thing. But when we start, I want to focus on the bottom. Bengals defensively, because the bottom is where I'll put like keynotes, things that I expect us to do. And obviously I had some matchup based things, running away from Josh Newton if we got that matchup. I think Cam Taylor-Britt played a little bit though in this game. But the first thing for me that I focus on is take the flats often and checkdowns. That was the very first thing that I had listed in here. And I think that's the first thing that's worth pointing out because I felt like we did a really nice job of taking that. And that's what Goff does well is he'll take what's there. He doesn't need to force downfield. And I think we felt that in this game. Jahmyr Gibbs ended up hitting his over, I know, in terms of receiving yards, 2 receptions for 33 yards. We also had Dave Montgomery with a reception for 6 yards. But I felt like a lot of that was mainly Sam Laporta. He was kind of the guy that thrived off that. He had the big kind of corner route early in this game. But 5 receptions, 92 yards. We saw the big kind of flat play coming out of, I think that was into the second half, where defensively, they end up getting in a spot where they're just going cover 3 defensively, but the play fake sells really well. They give the flat on Demetrius Knight, and they have this huge play. That wasn't something that was overly special because each of the past 2 weeks, they've allowed that. Each of the past 2 weeks, they've given up big plays on flat routes or bootlegs and just getting it out into the flats and making them play it. So based on that, I think the Lions did a good job at attacking that and finding real success when they did in this game. As we continue to go through this a little bit more here, you can see finding shots versus, in the middle of the field, using play action. Using play action would something be that you would need to do, but it was going to be a challenge. I thought to do it was constantly finding ways to open up play action. I thought it would be a little bit challenging in this game because of the depth they played with, but it was like, hey, if you can, you're in a really good spot because it is hard to pry open that middle. And I think a good example would be, honestly, the one that we were able to see because it turned into a sack was where the Lions had a sack, but it would have been there, and Goff really couldn't get it there. It was St. Brown cross the middle. They had a vertical shot over top, and they opened up that second level with the play action. They did a split zone look. Tight end came across, and he whiffed on his block. It was Brock Wright. Ended up giving up a sack. But if you watched from the backside angle, you could see that, St. Brown was going to be open. We just didn't have time to get it there. He needed like a tick longer. And I think that was a good example of, okay, the Lions were clearly getting them to buy the run fakes. The Lions were clearly had their attention in the run game, right? It felt like that. And I don't know how much, they play like single high and things like that, honestly, watching most of it live. But because I probably didn't focus the best on that. But that being said, it felt like they definitely grabbed their attention to the point where they were able to find some real success there. And even if you think about the big corner route to Laporta, like that's not working in the middle of the field. That's working the sideline. So overall, I still really like the way that I think they approached this and a lot of how they went about it. I thought we'd run the ball pretty well today. I thought we'd run the ball really well today, actually. I thought we'd be able to do it in a lot of different ways. But I think a couple of things that needs to be mentioned here. First off, I said lead runs. I would use lead runs in this game. Lions did that. Again, second half, they used a lot of 13 personnel. It was a nice little wrinkle. They came in almost exclusively 12 personnel in this game. So they constantly had multiple tight ends on the field, constantly played that kind of game. And to me, that idea for me was just, it doesn't need to be overly complex. We're just going to move you around. And it felt like that was their approach. But specifically in the second half, putting 3 tight ends and 1 receiver felt like it was absolutely that. Like, this isn't anything creative. We're just running the football. Now, I think the big element, though, and this is something that we talked about coming into it once we found out Decker was out, was the way that they ran the ball. And it was going a lot more outside. You can see at the bottom I had there weak zone runs, outside zone runs, right? That kind of thing. I think what was huge is that as this game rolled along and really coming into it knowing you didn't have Decker, the inside runs I thought would become a little bit less effective and dominant because you may not have the dominance at tackle versus end that I thought you would coming into the game. So all of a sudden that outside rushing scheme could take, kind of the focus away, and you can kind of lean into that a little bit more. And I think the Lions, again, did a really nice job of leaning into that outside stretch. But again, they did a lot of lead zones, multiple tight ends on the field. So again, I think the approach overall made sense. I think everything we're talking about here, the Lions kind of went at in this game. Hill will get pressure on the interior. They had guys that could get after it. Obviously, Hendrickson comes to life, especially when Decker's not available. They had guys that could get after it. I thought we'd be able to run the ball pretty well. I thought we'd run the ball pretty well towards the outside. The very first play from scrimmage, we tried to do a end around to JMO. It connected for 1 yard, but I thought the approach made sense. It was like, that's the right way I think I would go about it too. It just only went for a yard. You think about one of the touchdowns, it wasn't a run, but it was a wide receiver screen, but it was a screen to Jahmyr Gibbs, and we picked up 2 really good blocks. Tesla gets out there. I don't remember who the other block was. I think it was one of our tight ends. We're walking that thing into the end zone. So I think we did a nice job from that sense again and making their DBs tackle. Now, they made some plays. Hill's always aggressive. Dax Hill, that is. And then also they have Geno Stone, who made some good plays. He took away the HB flip that we tried as well. They did a pretty good job when we strung some things out. So I'll give credit to them. I think they handled that, again, a little bit better than I would have expected. Gibbs, though, was very efficient. 12 carries, 54 yards, 4.5 a pop. I'll take that. I'll take that. The only reason that that's not better is because we weren't on the field enough, right? We weren't converting enough at times in this game. And then Dave Montgomery finished really strong after kind of a shaky beginning, 18 of 65, 3.5 yards. He also had the touchdown and a touchdown pass. Shout out to Dave Montgomery for handling business there. All right, let's move to the other one so we can get a sense on the other side of the ball and kind of what the anticipation was coming into this. I'd say the big keys that I had coming into this game was that the route concepts weren't overly diverse. It was pretty straightforward. There's a lot of vertical route concepts. And you can see, again, don't focus on everything on the screen here. It was just how teams play them, right? You're keeping things in front. You don't want to give the big play. It's a lot of that. And I thought that was going to be a balancing act for Kelvin Shepard because ultimately I think they came in with a good plan, right? 2-man, 2 deep safeties. We're going to bracket those receivers in on third down. So you expect it to happen. Downside to that, especially on early downs, they could have success running the ball. I thought coming in, Chase Brown had ran the ball pretty well. And here's a crazy thing. And actually, now that I'm saying this out loud, I want to focus on a couple things here. Notice this graphic from the Bengals defense. Bengals defensively coming into this game, look how many plays they had on second and long versus second and short and second and medium. So many of the times they were on the field was second on a long situation. Same thing with third and long. So they constantly had teams backed up. I think that's an important little element to add, is that they have put teams in that spot. But if we flip it around to the other side, I think this is also important to look at this as well, is when you're playing that game, right? When you're playing too deep, you're going to allow Chase Brown to have some success. Weird game, honestly. I think it was somewhat weird, but not completely. And that's kind of what we're doing here. So what I'm showing for everybody just joining, I'm showing the pre-game graphics that we had, what my anticipation was, things to look out for versus what it showed up post-game. That way we can really dive into, okay, what went well, what didn't, based on expectation. Because I do think in the NFL, it's hard to just come into a game and say this guy performed well, this guy didn't, without also looking at the opposition. Because in the NFL, these are NFL players. There's really good players on each side. Every team has a strength. Every team has weaknesses, but their strategy. So this is based on my look into the game, but it does give me a better idea of how I thought they actually performed in an immediate post-game sense. So again, to this side, when you're playing that game, you're going to allow Chase Brown to have success. But look at the bottom. Those are some of the charted runs I had. I thought they'd run the ball pretty well in this game. The big thing is I thought they would go a little more gap scheme. I don't know that they did that as much in this game, some of the power runs, but Chase Brown has been effective. And even Kelvin talked about coming in this week, like, that's an explosive running back, and Chase Brown's good. They just don't run the ball enough. Like, from just that alone, they don't run the ball enough. I think that's a big problem from them. Obviously, 3 interceptions puts them in a really bad spot with how much they throw it. And offensively passing the football, their strategy has been kind of the same, right? In terms of the route concepts, not a ton, a lot of vertical stuff, right? Deep corner routes. Obviously, they had kind of the post corner route. They call it the touchdown at the end of the game on Amik Robertson. A couple of those, but a lot of stuff was vertical. But I think the first key that we got to take away from this is look at Cincinnati up until the big play for, I think it was Jamar Chase that scored that big touchdown. That may have been T. Higgins. I think it was Jamar Chase. They didn't really have explosives in the passing game. I think that's a huge positive to take away from this game. They didn't really have explosives at all in the passing game. Very limited explosives, and there wasn't that many penalties either. I thought coming in, my prediction was 28-13, or it was 27. I think it was 28-13 was my game prediction coming in. And for a while, I thought, okay, this is going to kind of fall where this game's going to fall. It just ended up, teams started scoring a little bit more at the end, and the score kind of got up on us. That's why I never bet the under with the Lions, because it never happens, it feels like. But anyways, we didn't really allow explosives to that point until that big double move. I mean, even on the game, T. Higgins was 3 for 22. So the plan was good. I think in obvious passing downs, 2 deep safeties, bracketing in these receivers. I think the plan was good. But I think it also speaks to, hey, I thought they'd get points alone off of they're going to have a couple explosives, and they're going to have real defensive pass interference calls in this game. I didn't think they had that many. I actually thought it was a real positive. Like, I walked away like they weren't really that impactful. I mean, until the end of the game, Meek gets beat on the double move. I think they were in quarters, so he's got no help over top. You can't bite. He does. He gets beat over top. Outside of that, I was pretty pleased, right? Rocky Sin stepped in, did some good things for us in this game. We kind of got depleted a bit in this game as well. Terrion had kind of a weird underneath DPI, and then he had one on a curl too. So they were probably 7 yards combined, but there were 2 defensive penalties, one that wiped off a safety. But outside of that, had a pass breakup, had 3 straight good plays, and we'll talk about those. But pass breakup, probably would have had an interception, but Kirby took it away. So I think the fact that they were able to really limit big plays for almost the entirety of the game, which was the one thing that could seemingly keep them in the game, was a big positive. So for me, I thought that had to be the approach of, we can't give up the explosives, because if there's one thing that would allow Cincinnati to make this a game, is them getting explosives. That's the only thing that makes this a football game for them, is they get big plays in the passing game, because they don't consistently stay on the field, and they also give up a very high conversion rate. Now, that was probably one of the biggest negatives for us offensively, which we'll talk about. But again, that was the one way they were going to make this thing a game. And until the end of the game, they didn't really have that. So it felt like they were out of it the entire time until, it loosened up a little bit towards the end. So overall, I do feel really good about the fact the Lions were able to limit that for a majority of the game. You'd like to see them finish it out that way, but for a majority of the game, they were able to limit that. A couple of other things that were worth noting coming into this game that I think did play out. Attacking with stunts and games, he's not comfy in the pocket and bring linebackers. What did that mean? Well, really, this meant this. Jake Browning makes his decisions very fast. And we had watched these clips, watched the film on, this guy's going to very quickly decide, I'm going to this guy. I got a one-on-one here. That's where the ball's going. So for him, he has missed routes this year that have been open because he's already made up his mind. Oh, the one-on-one with T. Higgins, that's where the ball's going. And we saw in this game the amount of times that we couldn't get sacks because the ball would be out so fast. The guys that weren't even open is how exactly that played out. It was a very quick decision. He's putting the ball out there, and we'll see what happens. It limits our ability to actually get sacks. It felt like Hutch was all over this dude, but he only got there one time, really 2, but really one time in this game. because he's getting the ball out so fast. But I think the other element, which is key there, is bring linebackers. The guy that gets to safety, Derek Barnes, he gets to safety, bring linebackers. They felt very impactful. And the Lions, to me, not a great linebacking unit in terms of blitzing. I don't think that's their strength as a team, but I think in this game, based on what Cincinnati was stylistically, specifically on the interior, Dylan Fairchild's a rookie. Jalen Rivers is a rookie. Ted Karras is struggling. He's not the most athletic center either. When that's your interior offensive line, you have to test those guys. And I think the Lions did a great job of not only having some games up front, using their athleticism. Al-Quadi Muhammad nearly had a sack off the right guard, but it was specifically bringing backers, making those guys come after, making them pick them up. And obviously, it got us off the field at the end. But I think that impact was a lot more felt in this game than it typically is in terms of our linebackers getting after it. So from that element alone, I'm very positive and happy with how they ended up playing that out. So again, not a lot of diversity. It felt like they were going to have concepts-wise in terms of their pass game, and I really don't think that they did. I mean, for a while, there was really inefficient passing in this game. He was 26 for 40, but for a while, it was very inefficient. And then he had 3 interceptions on top of that as well. And some of these interceptions were just great plays. I mean, one of them, I think, was a cover 3. Amik Robertson sitting outside leverage on Jamar Chase. He just doesn't put the ball in a great spot at all. He throws it inside, ball's picked off. Really wasn't open at all. Meek played it well, takes it. We got great field position. The other interception, he tries to throw it over Alex Anzalone's head. And that's one where, again, I think we were in cover 3 once again here. Brian Branch drops off the flat route. Now he's got to go over top of the backer because he can't lead him. And he got Kirby Joseph driving down on the route, covers that up well. There's no window really there. Alex takes it away. It's another example. But I think it was also playing to the element that what Jake Browning was doing in this game was nothing really new. I mean, he's made these fast decisions all season long. The problem has been is teams have lost one-on-ones at times. And when you do, you're like, oh, they're not too bad offensively. And they're going to really put a lot of pressure on you there. But the problem is they didn't do that nearly enough in this game, at least until the end, to find any kind of effectiveness with that being consistent in their offense. So the Lions' ability to limit that, I think, was a big positive. Again, they ran the ball okay, 16 for 85. That's 5 yards a carry. They just didn't get enough rushes in this game, which I think is really the biggest takeaway from it all, is they didn't have nearly enough rushes. By the way, Aiden Hutchinson, 5 quarterback hits in this game. 5 quarterback hits. Al-Quadi Muhammad, 3 quarterback hits. They also had Derek Barnes with the sack. That's 9 quarterback hits, according to ESPN in this game, which is fantastic. So, again, I think schematically, the plan was really good on both sides. I really like that John Morton kind of shook things up there in the second half, helped get the run game going a bit in this game. Now I think it's time. And again, 28-13, I thought I was in business. And then all of a sudden I wasn't, because they started scoring a lot more at the end of this game. But I think a lot of things kind of played out how we would have anticipated in this game. It's just the timing was a little bit different. I thought they would do a little bit more offensively a little bit earlier in this game. Also, I didn't love the idea of running screens against this team, specifically to running backs or tight ends, but I like the 2 receivers. Well, Jahmyr Gibbs walked his in on a touchdown just like that. One of our tight end screens to Brock Wright was an absolute disaster. So I think that kind of played out as well. I'm trying to think if there's one I'm missing, but I'm pretty sure that was the gist of screens. So I actually think it actually kind of worked out just like that as well in this game. And then from a receiver perspective, it was all St. Brown all day. It was St. Brown just being dominant. And again, that one was, to me, based on the way that Cincinnati plays defensively, right? They're going to make it hard to go level 2. So Laporta and St. Brown ate because of that. And also, here was the element that we talked about coming in. There's not a matchup for St. Brown on this defense. Simple as that. They don't have a guy for St. Brown. They don't have a guy on this defense that can match up St. Brown. They don't have a guy that can play man-to-man on St. Brown. They don't have a guy for that. And they play too deep in coverage in zone where they're going to give you things underneath. And it felt like it played out just like that. And maybe they tried to try some things level 2. They couldn't. So it became the Laporta show. But regardless, they didn't really have a guy for St. And even though coming in, that's the key. If you're going to stick to who you are defensively at Cincinnati, there's no answer for that guy. And it played out really well. I do like the Lions' little addition of the stacks. We've done that before, but stacking receivers, specifically against zone, it obviously can be effective against man too, but stacking receivers to create spacing was very effective in this game. I really like that, because coming in, I thought, okay, fast motion. We had the little fast motion, got out to the flat. I think it was JMO that picked up, and I think it was JMO on that play. Then I remember, no, it wasn't JMO. It must have been one of our tight ends. Maybe it was Laporta that got into the flat. But again, attacking flats. But I did like that, because that seemed to open up some real spacing for us. Wide splits, stack the receivers, create windows just like that in terms of this zone coverage, spread them out a bit, and then be able to work off that leverage that you create from the stack. So I think that was really good as well. But even on that touchdown play to Jahmyr Gibbs, a nice little wrinkle. And I don't know that they did this because of this, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if the Lions looked at, hey, this is what Minnesota did. Minnesota's first touchdown against Cincinnati was they put Adam Thielen at running back. They I think they wheeled him out of the backfield, but that matchup change allowed for spacing, so they were able to sit down the receiver. I think it was their tight end. He walks into the end zone. Lions came out, St. Brown at running back, went the opposite way, and all of a sudden it walked us into the end zone. The blocking was fantastic, again, going at those DBs, but it was a nice little wrinkle, nice little addition to kind of what the play was ultimately there. So for me, the game, I think a lot of ways kind of played out how I thought it would. It wasn't always as clean as I would have hoped it would be in this game. But like I said, I'm just happy we won this football game. So let's dive into some of the specifics from this game. Let's go through some of the plays here, specifically from what took place. Lions came out very successful first drive. Again, the end around was big. The check down to get things started for 13 yards. The first two plays were exactly what I would have expected. Laporta hits the corner route. So again, you're staying off the middle of the field. And then he ran the ball pretty well. The stretch run was 4 yards. The counter for 4 yards. A little inside run for a yard. And then you check it down to Laporta, and he's walking in the end zone. So I would say the first drive went exactly how I would have expected. Defensively, shot the Tyleek. I think he had the first pass breakup of the game specifically. They had a little success pushing the ball 6 yards. Hutch ends up going off sides, but he would have had a sack. I guess he would have had 3 sacks. He jumps off sides, or he just lined up off sides. Then they end up hitting kind of a broken play. They hit the little drag pass. Kirby Joseph gets called for a penalty afterward, but then we stand up, and Kirby makes a fantastic play. Route gets behind him. Again, they're trying to move the pocket, which was, I think, to their credit, smart. They did a lot of half rolls. They moved the pocket. They didn't allow him to just sit back there. I think it was a smart plan by them, and this one was a fantastic play. Kirby to redirect, get back, break it up at the catch point was awesome. Then they went to the flat. Terrion was on there. There was 2 defenders there. Terrion, I think Amik as well. That pass was broken up, and then they got called for a false start. Then they ran a screen, which again, I do want to point this out as well. If we go back to the Bengals, let's go back to the Bengals offensively. If you look at them on 3rd and long, for whatever reason, they didn't really push the envelope on any 3rd and long. It never felt like that's the way that they were going to play. So a lot of teams will play this softer coverage, 3 match, cover 3 buzz, 2 man. And I think we did that. But it was the fact that Cincinnati wouldn't ever press the issue. So watching it live, like, this is probably going to be something underneath and end up being a screen because they wouldn't press the issue in those spots. So I would say the first 2 drives kind of went as expected. Come back on offense, it's a check down, it's 14 yards to Sam Laporta. So you attack the flats, you attack the check downs, you made their DBs tackle, that's a positive. Unfortunately, Monty wasn't as effective, and we really leaned behind that right side without Taylor Decker early in this game. A 0-yard run to Monty on a stretch run. We end up hitting St. Brown on a quick slant, level 1 route. That picks up a first down. They had Joseph Osai. Again, they did some of that simulated pressure stuff, so to attack that, that's no match for St. Brown in space, and you just kind of, that may have been a stack as well, and they end up picking up a nice gain there. Then they run a quick hitch to St. Brown again, sits on his own, 8 more yards. Then the fast motion, that's what I thought we'd do. I didn't anticipate the stacks, but that worked too. Fast motion picks up a nice gain, and then they end up fumbling. And this was really what stalled it, because we're moving the ball incredibly well both of these first 2 drives. We try to throw here. Manu gets beat. Goff I thought it was a pass. They called him for a fumble. That stuffed that drive. But ultimately, the first 2 drives were going really well. Defensively, then a 2-yard run, a 4-yard check down. Al-Quani Muhammad got in there, and then another pass breakup. This was Alex Anzalone, a 2-man look, right? They're bracketing those receivers. They're saying somebody else beat us, and they didn't consistently enough in this game. And because of that, Lions end up getting off the field. Maybe at the end of the game, they should have been more aggressive to sit in that kind of coverage. Maybe that's possible. I don't know exactly that they didn't do that, but it's possible that they didn't. And then we get off the field again. Shout out to defense. Defense was awesome. 2 things that were awesome today. Defense was really good up until probably the end of the game, like the last couple of drives. And special teams was fantastic. Kick returns, I don't know that they had one that crossed the 30. We had one really good one, I think, in this game near the 40. Punt coverage was outstanding. It was all really good. I thought special teams was pretty dominant in this game. They made a field goal, but outside of that, I thought we were outstanding on special teams in this game. We get the ball back. Then offensively in this one, we run a stretch to Jahmyr Gibbs that ends up picking up 5 yards. St. Brown's running under angle route. They're sitting that Tampa 2. They're just sitting deep, and you're just going underneath that, again, on level of stuff. 4-yard run, 5-yard run. Now you had the negative 2-yard run. Hendrickson blows it up. That's kind of the equalizer, I guess, is I didn't think their DNs were great, so I thought you could go at them, and he made a play. That's kind of the equalizers. Like, Trey's occasionally going to make some of those plays. They also, Goff, now this was one, this is a good example. Level 2 throws, which would be 10 to like 20 yards, right? Those are level 2. That throw that Goff tried to put to St. Brown, he ran like that deep curl, it looked like, or maybe it was an inbreaker, and he kind of set it down, and it was tight. That window was tight. And St. Brown maybe could have caught it. But that was a great example of this is what Cincinnati takes away. And when you watch Goff throw that, you're like, dang, that was really, you had to thread the needle to try to give him a chance there. So I think that was a good example of like, okay, this is how the game's going to go. This is what they're taking away. This is why it's challenging to have these kind of completions. And that was a really good example of like, dude, that was some tight coverage there. And they end up getting sacked on the very next play on a 3rd and 12. I don't remember that one very well, but 3rd and 12, we're way too far behind the chains. Back to the defense side of things, Brian Branch ends up getting some pressure again. We're pinning them in their own end zone. We played the field position battle early in this game. We probably could have been more aggressive, plus territory, but we're like, let's just keep putting them in their own end zone, which ended up, I think, working out as a very big positive. Nearly had a safety because of that. Branch got some pressure, and then immediately you got the interception from Meek Robertson. So shout out to the defense, keeping them in their own end zone. 3-yard run, 10-yard run, you get behind Laporta, 3-yard run, negative 2-yard run, which it looked like I think Tate lost the block or the center, and then we did the pop pass for a touchdown. So I'd say early in this game, it was actually a pretty strong start before things felt like they stalled a touch in this one. Again, kickoff return coverage. 2 stops early, Trevor Nowaski. 2 great stops by Trevor Nowaski on KOR coverage. And then defensively, they went to a check down, picked up 9. Meek missed his man on the screen, so they picked up the first down, a couple more yards. Then you had a drag route. Jack Campbell ends up making the stop in one of their cover 3s. Outside zone picks up a first down, and that's when the Lions kind of stand up, right? They try the rollout play. Alex Anzalone shuts that down. Brian Branch ends up jumping on the drag route. Again, they're bracketing in these receivers for top receivers. Terrian's in coverage. That's shut down. Then Rocky Sin, fantastic play. Shout out to one of the standouts, Rocky Sin, in this game. Pass break up on Higgins. They try to take that deep post shot. Again, wasn't the most dynamic in terms of the routes that they were going to test you with. It's not like when you play Justin Jefferson, you're like, dude, he runs the entire field. It doesn't feel like that. That's not what this team felt like. It's much more of a vertical playing field to it, but you have to handle that. And I would say we did. For what we had available, very proud of how they handled that, and Rocky Sin was a big part of that. Then you get back out there offensively, you hit the big screen to get things started. Again, a receiver screen. That's why it worked. 16 yards, 1 yard to Monty. Another flat route, 7 yards, before all of a sudden you have an incomplete pass. They end up bringing a blitz, and Mahogany kind of misses his block, I think, on the play there. So a 3rd down and 2, like, you got to pick up first there. 3rd down and 2, you can't get stuffed on the 3rd down and 2. We'll work through a couple more of these, and then we'll leave it there. Defensively, just to kind of recap this game, defensively, Jack Campbell and Al get a stop on an inside run. Then you have the safety, the holding call. Terrion Arnold gets called for the defense holding. They run that little hitch, and that's where he was just being too handsy there. That's where you had the safety by Aiden Hutchinson that ended up getting called back. But then he bounced back. He bounced back himself. Pass break up on T. Higgins the very next play. Next play after that, he drops an interception on the sideline where Chase has to shove him out of bounds. Very next play after that, he goes deep. Lions are in that probably a 3 buzz look, playing that soft coverage. He takes the shot in the traffic. Kirby picks it off. Terrion was waiting there for a pick. So 3 straight plays were great response from him. Again, good field position for us, which is fantastic. And then offensively, we get back out there and we have a TFL, probably more TFLs than I would have anticipated. Probably too many negatives in the run game. That would be the biggest thing looking back on this. We ran that tight end screen. That was a disaster. And then we just went underneath from St. Brown. So you had to be effective on first down. And one thing that I will say, and this is why I pointed this out right here, just earlier in this show, look at this. Look at their 3rd downs. I mean, most of their 3rd downs were 3rd down and long that I had charted through, right? They're getting teams backed up. So credit to them. They were doing a good job, 2nd and long, 3rd and longs, putting teams in that spot. They've done a good job, and I think it's because they make it hard to hit the level 2 shot. You have to just take what's there, and especially if you're having inconsistencies running. For us, it was in this case, we had too many TFLs running the football, it looks like. To wrap up halftime, defense gets back out there. Barnes makes a stop, a 4-yard run. They end up running that slant. And this is where their offense found traction, it felt like early. Just a quick slant on Amik Robertson. You win 1-on-1. Broken play, that picked up 25 yards. That's how it always goes on broken plays. Slant on Terrion Arnold, Jamar Chase once again there. Then they hit the big comeback route, it looked like, on Rocky Sin. So they started to find their matches a little bit. They tried to screen. Jack Campbell halted that, shot at to him. These linebackers Jack Campbell had a really good game. From initial memory, Jack Campbell was doing work in this game. They had a little scramble. Reeder was chasing him. Derek Barnes was chasing him. Then they had a delay of game. Then they ran another slant, and they ended up picking up about 11 yards before they kicked the long field goal. So, again, we just kind of beat one of them there again, Amik Robertson. But it was far enough that, they ended up just having to kick the field goal before half. And then defensively, again, a 5-yard run. So they're having success, but trying to throw the ball was not successful. And them looking for their shot plays, which, again, I think they just throw the ball too much. Them looking for their shot plays, that was the interception. Alex kind of just standing there. And, again, our linebackers don't find routes in cover 3. Typically, they don't. They just kind of sit in their zones. They'll get some depth, but they're pulling top down. They're ready to dive on checkdowns. It's on our coverage in the back end to be really good. And Branch was good to dive out. Kirby shut it down. Backside has to carry on the backside route. Like, they all did their job. So everything was a tight window because of what the secondary did. So credit to Alex, but really credit to that secondary as well, because they are tasked with a lot in those spots for those linebackers to be able to sit and play top down, rather than kind of what Cincinnati would do, which is like open your hips, find the route, try to cut it off yourself. Like, we don't play that style as much. So that was a really nice play. And then we ended up scoring the touchdown off of a 3-yard run. Laporta on a check down. Running back was forcing pass pro. That's when I was talking about, where we kind of just try to hit that spot route, but it's because we had to leave running back in for pass pro, which means you lose your check down option, which means all of a sudden it's a complete pass. We end up hitting St. Brown on the first down to keep the drive alive, then a 6-yard run, a 4-yard run, then the receiver screen, and that punches us into the end zone. So ultimately here, as we work through that, again, defense gets an immediate 3-and-out, a 6-yard run. I don't know why they didn't run the ball more. I guess the next play was a 2-yard run. But then on third down and 2, this was a weird thing with Cincy. They would take shots on 3rd and 2. Like, their last week's game was Denver. There was 2 early 3rd down and 2s. They took deep shots, and you're like, why are they doing that? Like, I get it's threatening, and maybe they're thinking, well, okay, Mal, we'll get 1 high safety because it's 3rd down and 2. But man, it's like they're getting one-on-ones. I guess in fairness, they did get one-on-ones those spots, but it's like, I don't know if that's worth the risk. And they tried that. In this case, they had to go underneath. We didn't let them get the verticals. Alex breaks it up. Shout out to the other guys in coverage. Duracell, fantastic. Shout out to those guys in coverage that weren't matched up with who you would have normally talked about coming into this game, which Chase and with Higgins in this game, right? The other guys. We then go score on our very next play again. The boot was the big play. That was our check. Our big play was check downs, right? 4-yard run, 13-yard, check down to Monty. Big run, bounced outside. Now Monty started going. Now the 13 personnel came alive, and the Lions opened up their offense. So I would say overall in this one, I think game did go a lot of as I expected, I guess, looking back. Probably too many negatives in the run game. I think second half was better there. Defensively, obviously, we gave up a couple of shots late. There was some really good things Browning did with his legs, created the broken play, scored the 1 touchdown on the side of the end zone, had a couple of, I thought, were weak penalties, but they had some penalties, which, again, was kind of expected against these receivers. We're going to get called for a few of those. They also throw the ball too much for you not to. But ultimately, until that big play over top by Meek, like, I was pretty pleased with how this game ended up going. So score again, I thought I was going to hit it. I was very optimistic. I was like, oh man, I'm going to hit 28-13. It's going to be, nah, it didn't last. It didn't last. Too many points. It was 28-17 and we scored again and they had to score again. So it was just too many points. But ultimately, the Lions won. They covered. And what matters is they won. They're 4-1 on the season with 2 monster games coming up. But the most important part of all of this, so we're first in the NFC North still. Yes, they on bye week. They only got 2 wins. We got 4. I need to calm down. It's a bye week. Also, we got to get our secondary right. We got to get these guys healthy. So hopefully that happens. Shout out to Trey Flowers stepping in. I don't think they targeted him at all, but shout out to him stepping in. All right, we're going to get out of here, man. I appreciate y'all joining for this post-game show, and I'll see y'all during the week. Have a great week. Have a great weekend. Enjoy Sunday Night Football.